And welcome back once again, everyone, to the Maine State Chamber of Commerce and the Bottom Line. We are coming to you from the studios of the Williams Broadcasting Group, creative programming for radio, television, and diversified full-length podcasts for the web. That is at williamsbroadcasting.net. We come your way twice every month, and by the way, we are always live streaming from our studios, so it's great to have you with us. By the way, if you've never listened to us before on any of your apps that you listen to your favorite podcast on, we're going to be there. The Bottom Line will always be there. You can always go to our website, and the graphic on the website will take you right to our homepage. You can listen to it there or any one of our archived shows as well. So we encourage you to do that. And I'm John Williams, always joined by my co-host, Patrick Woodcock, President and CEO of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And good morning to you, Patrick.
Great to be with you, John.
Absolutely, as always. And we are pleased this week to welcome Philip Harriman, co-founder and senior financial advisor for Lebel and Harriman. And Phil, it is a pleasure to have you join us on The Bottom Line today.
Well, I've always enjoyed listening to the Bottom Line podcast. I never thought I would be a guest, so I'm very honored to be with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And by the way, I have to tell you that I noticed that on your bio, some of the things you love to do are fly fishing. Boy, I am a big-time fly fisherman.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing better than going up into the Maine wilderness in the 2nd Congressional District and trying to find a little honeypot, if you will, to catch a salmon bigger than the last one.
That's exactly right. So absolutely. And I will be heading up to Kennebago on Memorial Day weekend at Grant's Camps, and which I have been doing for the last 50 years. And
what a special place.
It is a special place.
Do you get to the Big Eddy at all up in Millinocket?
I haven't been up there, no. And is that one of the places where you go?
Oh yeah. That's you got to be a intermediate or better fly fisherman to be successful there, but it's worth it.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, having said that, we've talked about our equal likes, as I like to call it, and now I'm going to hand things back over to Patrick. Patrick, go for it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We always like to begin with professional trajectory, what brought you to Lebel and Harriman, but also your experience in public policy. You know, not a stranger to anybody who's been following Maine politics and Maine public policy for, for a generation here. But really would love to just an introduction for those who have not followed your career, Philip. Really take us back to what led you to this role and your interest in public policy.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I would I'll try to keep it at a 30,000-foot aerial view. My roots are in Yarmouth, Maine. I still live there. I guess you'd call me a townie, and raised my 3 kids as well, and was very, very proud to be part of a family business. My grandfather started a couple of supermarkets, and my uncle and my dad followed in his footsteps. And that was my career dream, was to become the 3rd generation to run our supermarkets. And heartbreakingly, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he passed away at a very, very young age. And I ended up having to pursue a different career path and got into the financial services profession, entered the business with then Governor Jim Longley's organization, and began helping people prepare for retirement, and evolved when the banks and the stockbrokers and the insurance people all started jumping into each other's business. And I thought, there's really no one out there that has that unique ability to understand how family businesses operate. It's if you will, Patrick, it's a combination of emotion, money, business, family, all in the same room at the same time. And that can oftentimes become very explosive, if I could use that word. So I specialized in our firm, helping family businesses sort through how do they transition this business from one generation to the next, or to a new owner. And preparing a business for an external transition is very different than an internal one. And so I've been very fortunate to have clients throughout New England and beyond, but the heart and soul of the work I do is with Maine family businesses, from the forest products profession to the high-tech sector and everything in between.
Phil, one of the things that I wanted to jump right into is that one of the things that I am familiar, especially with you, about is your you were in the Senate for 4 terms, representing the 23rd district in the Maine Senate, and I know that some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are going to are going to touch on. Speaking of business, is going to be touching on kind of the business environment here in the state of Maine. And one of the things I think that I recognize, because I'm, when I'm not doing broadcasting, I'm the director of the Oxford Hills Chamber of Commerce, and dealing with businesses, it's been very challenging from the perspective of kind of the mentality that we have seen for a period of years. And I don't think I'm saying anything that anyone doesn't know, that has kind of been, I hate to use the word anti-business, but there's no question in my mind that I think some of what we've been seeing and some of the challenges we've been associated with has been part of what it is that we've been up against. In your experience, in the Senate, and your experience as a political analyst, what have you seen as being the biggest challenges that we've been facing here in the state of Maine over the last couple of decades?
In a word, apathy. One of my clients was, and still is today, the folks up in Pittsfield at Chimbro, and Chuck Chinquette was one of my clients. And in the midst of the workers' compensation crisis during the Governor John McKernan era, uh, devolved into the state government literally shutting down. And Chuck Chinquette was a former Democrat state senator, I think in the 70s. And I was in his office to review some of his succession planning. And he couldn't get off the topic of what was going on in Augusta, and finally said, I've had enough. This isn't the same place that our family immigrated to and built this business. And I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to run for the state Senate.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, here's a guy who was successful, who was on the back nine of his, career, wanting to go back and serve the people of Maine. And I said, wow, I really admire you for wanting to do that. What can I do to help you? And he said, oh, I'm glad you asked. I need you to run for the state Senate in your area of the state. And my first reaction was, oh, no, I can't mix my clients and my politics. And he said, Phil, if we don't have more people like you who know what it's like to sign the front of a payroll check, who's got kids in local schools, uh, this economy is just going to get worse. We need people who are uh, familiar with how businesses run in our state to be engaged. And that was the impetus for my getting elected to the state Senate. But to your point, John, I think what happens is the people who are in the private sector, they just want to pay attention to their business. They
Yeah.
just want to, serve their customers, be good stewards of their employees, make some charitable contributions to help the community in which they live in, and be left alone. And the other side of the political spectrum, the advocates, they understand how the engine of government works. They've got the wrenches and they're in there tinkering away, and they do that incrementally and sometimes in big, bold ways. And before you know it, Maine businesses wake up, as Patrick can, I'm sure, attest. Oh my goodness, in the middle of the night, the legislature took up this big piece of legislation. It got jammed through without anybody knowing about it. And the business community has to just absorb the results. And I just wish more chambers of commerce and more business owners would be more of an advocate, as I've tried to be, to stand up and speak up for the people who are taking the risk of creating jobs. And you can do it respectfully and diplomatically. it doesn't have to be someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. It's got to be more of an enlightenment. And unless the people who are uh, creating the jobs are willing to stand up and be heard, I think we're going to find more and more of this public policy that happens in the middle of the night unfold.
Thank you for that, Phil.
I'd say I have very early memories of the workers' comp reform. However, for sort of the business icons that I've spoken to who have seen what's occurred in Augusta recently and the period in the early 90s when workers' comp was going on, it has reminded them a little bit of when businesses spoke with assertiveness, when they saw an assault on livelihoods, and it was a moment of deep concern of the state's economy. And I wonder if you could give us a little bit more color on, what you're feeling for the state's economy now versus that period, a really challenging period for our state's history, kind of in the early '90s during a recession. What's your assessment kind of the economy now, Philip?
I think the new frontier technology-based economies are going to be fine. The IDEXs and the WEXs, and they're going to find a way to succeed. Uh, the the biggest concern I think out there is in the service sector, where they're concerned that artificial intelligence is going to completely disrupt the middle management employment sector. And I would just say that artificial intelligence is that it's artificial. So if you can find a way to understand how these artificial intelligence systems work, and you can be the one who controls and manages them, you're going to be fine. But where I really do have concern, Patrick, is in our natural resources based community. If you go it's hard to get them to talk on the record because they're proud private family businesses. But if you go and look at what's going on in the forest products industry, between electricity costs, fuel costs, tariffs, currency rate exchange, there's a lot of our forest products industry that I think is in a feeble position. We just saw one, Lumbra up in Milo, 75-year-old family business, been in business for 75 years, hired 20, 30 employees, gone. And I just wonder how many more are in that predicament. And I suspect it also transfers into the fishing profession, the farming. If we're not careful, we're going to find more and more of that sector of our economy, which, as you know, Patrick, for more than 100 years, it's been our natural resources of Maine that has been sort of the economic heartbeat of our economy, and I think we're seeing that diminish rapidly.
Phil, I'm fascinated by what you do from the perspective of working with family-held and nonprofit businesses, and when you talk about business continuation arrangements and negotiation and compensation, can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's something that it seems to me in this particular day and age with what we're dealing with, that is so critically important that there is someone there like yourself that is working with these family held businesses, whether they're profit or nonprofit, and trying to keep them not only giving them a sense of what it takes to stay afloat, but also what they can look ahead to in the kind of environment that we're in right now.
The U.S. Census tells us that every day in America, 10,000 people wake up to their 65th birthday. And that's going to happen for probably another 5 years. And many people who have reached that age can tell you that that 65th birthday is like no other. It's a recognition that more years are behind me than are in front of me. They ask themselves, what's my life's work been like? Will my grandchildren even know who I am? It's a really an awakening birthday. It also is that time when I think many family business owners that are run by a patriarch or a matriarch, it's been their life, right? It's who they are. It has been their pride within their community, their employees, their family. They've educated their kids, they paid for weddings, etc. It's been the heart and soul of who they are, and they have to recognize that that era of their life is likely coming to a close, and that they can either be in control of it or it's going to be in control of them. And what I take a lot of pride in is making sure that we understand the dynamics. And I call it the alignment of your head, your heart, and your stomach. And, and by that, I mean everybody who's got an emotional or financial or both interest in a business needs to be heard and understood. And only then can you do math and tax law and all of those things to help a family business recognize how are they going to carry on into the future. I have seen so many instances in my career, having worked with hundreds of family businesses, where there was a methodical conversation about who in the family wants to step up and step into the future of the business and who doesn't. There's no right or wrong or uh, yes or no. It's what works for everybody, so that the business has a chance to not only succeed but thrive. I've seen many times in my career, John and Patrick, where someone was expected, they're the oldest child and they were expected to come and take over mom or dad's role in the company. And they wake up at 50 years age and they're like, I'm not fulfilled. This really wasn't my passion, but I'm trapped in a mortgage and college tuitions. And so I could go on, but my what I take pride in is making sure that I help everyone align their heads, their hearts, and their stomach as it relates to what matters to them personally, professionally, financially, and for their family. And once you've sorted those things out, it becomes pretty clear what path the business should take to implement a succession plan. And then it makes it a lot easier for the attorneys and the accountants to do their job effectively.
Well, thank you for that,
You know,
Patrick. Should we take a little break?
yeah, but I just wanted to follow up. I did want
Sure.
to turn to public policy and some of the changes in Maine state law that just occurred. But drilling down, because I think there are a lot of businesses listening to this, that, where to start, Philip. I have heard from so many businesses. I've heard from so many businesses that they hit this moment of distress. They haven't planned for this. They're the stable business, but their leadership, um, either passed away quickly or needed to exit rapidly, and they leave a lot of value on the table. Just to continue, what's the first step for a small business owner who might be working tirelessly day and day and hasn't really thought about, where the business goes in a succession?
That is the nerve. And back to what I was saying earlier, Patrick, about it's going to control you or you're going to control it. Those examples you just gave the business is controlling it rather than you. So my advice would be to find someone like me who isn't going to call balls and strikes, but rather who's going to help you implement a succession plan. And I describe it as most business owners every day, they work in the business. And what I try to say is you got to pause, take a break, get out of the office, come to my office, and let's work on the business, not in the business. And when you work on the business, it gives you an entirely different perspective as to, well, what would you want to have happen if you, you know, had a stroke and became disabled and weren't able to do your job, or if you passed away, or one of your key employees said, gee, my father-in-law is very, very ill and they live in Arizona, and so I'm giving my 2-week notice. Taking time to work on the business, to think through these scenarios that you just described, is so important. But most businesses don't make that a priority.
Well, thank you. I do want to turn to public policy, but I think you're right, John. Let's take our break and move to our competitiveness as a state after we return.
That sounds great. We'll take that break and be right back. I'm John Williams for Patrick Woodcock and Philip Harriman. It is the bottom line, everybody. Hold on. We'll be right back. I've been traveling north from Norway to Grant's Kennebago camps on the crystal clear waters of Kennebago Lake near Rangeley for over 50 years, and it won't be long before I'm headed back. Fly fishing for native brook trout, brown trout, and salmon in one of the most pristine settings anywhere in North America. What always stands out to me is the stunning beauty of this area filled with wildlife like moose grazing in the Norton Brook area, easily seen from Grant's dining room on the main lodge on the shores of the lake, along with the haunting and beautiful calls of the loon as they cruise by the camp's day and night. It is truly a sportsman's paradise. And if fly fishing isn't for you, then paddle a canoe or kayak, take a refreshing swim, or walk the miles of hiking trails, or even ride your mountain bike on the camp road next to the lake and river. In the meantime, you'll enjoy 3 home-cooked meals a day and stay in cabins that are sitting on the water's edge with screened-in porches where you can relax and enjoy the breathtaking natural beauty of the lake and the mountains around it. Owners John and Carolyn Blunt, they're always there to greet you, and the fishing either on the lake or in the river is simply legendary. Take it from me. A family trip to Grants will change your whole perspective of what an adventure vacation can mean. Go to grantscamps.com for all the information and reservations, and it's very likely that you'll see me there. And we are back once again, everybody. It's The Bottom Line. John Williams, Patrick Woodcock, and our very special guest today, which is Philip Harriman, co-founder and senior financial advisor for Lebel and Harriman. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Patrick, because I know you've got some specific things that you would like to speak about.
Well, one of the reasons we invited Philip to the program today was quoted recently in a Wall Street Journal article about implications from a new surtax. And I want to just turn, when you heard about the surtax, it happened pretty rapidly. It was not part of the governor's budget proposal, kind of a last minute negotiation with the legislature. What was your reaction when you heard that Maine would be imposing a new surtax on income above $1 million?
I was really disappointed, Patrick, because rather than having a public hearing and allowing the people listening to this podcast who might be impacted to have a chance to go to Augusta and put perspective into the conversation. As we talked about earlier, this is what happens late in the session when there are political agendas that are perhaps not popular. That's when they get jammed into the state budget. And in this case, the governor, who in the past was resistant to this new tax, basically said, I'm going to sign it. And what frustrated me, Patrick, was that for many people who hear, let's tax the millionaires, it seems fair, justified. They got all the money, but there's a problem. When you tax people harder, you forget that these are the same ones, for the most part, that they build the companies, they hire the workers, they fund the growth, they already carry a disproportionate share of the tax burden that keeps government running. And for those who have mobility, they're not going to stay here and be punished. They're going to leave. And so what that does, it leaves a smaller pool of these so-called millionaires who probably have roots in the community in manufacturing or retail or excavation. Then they can't pick up their business and move. They're just going to have to take this additional punch. And it just seems to me that rather than welcoming more people who have wealth to come here for all the reasons that make Maine a special place to live, we're saying to them, if you have mobility, if you're intergenerational wealth, or you're an artist or an actor, or someone who can earn their wealth anywhere, they're going to move. And I know in my own practice, and I bet if you talk to other people in the financial services profession, they can point to several people a year who make the change to a Florida or a Tennessee to avoid the income tax. It's real. And there are some, I think it's fair to say, Stephen King, who was also in that Wall Street Journal article favoring the tax. There are people like that who have such significant wealth that an additional surtax is not going to change their lifestyle. But for many others, Patrick, particularly those who work with their hands and equipment and machines, those are less dollars that they have to give raises or buy more tools for the workers or whatever it may be. And then you add on top of that the 1% payroll tax that Maine implemented for the paid family medical leave. It's just incrementally, it's like Pac-Man just keeps nibbling and biting and taking more and more of what you work so hard to earn.
Uh, Phil, I'd like to continue that thought for just a moment and say this. Whatever happened to the mentality, and perhaps among our state government leaders, that working hard for a living and doing exactly what you just mentioned, especially at the small business level, building up your business and attaining that hard fought revenue base that could be $1 million or above $1 million, whatever happened to the mentality that we should be rewarding these people and supporting these people for what it is that they've been able to accomplish, as opposed to putting more pressure on them from the perspective of taxes, which, as you mentioned just a moment ago, a couple of times, forces them to mobilize the business and move outside the state of Maine. And then, if I can ask you this, what does it mean from the perspective of businesses that have been looking to come to the state of Maine, and they take a look at what is this type of mentality that is taking place at the legislative level, and how does that affect them from the perspective of their plans?
When I was a young man growing up in Yarmouth, we had a roof over our head, we had a car, food. I had a baseball glove, sneakers. We were middle class Maine, and just a few uh, blocks down the road were these really big houses, and people had two cars, and the kids had all the sports equipment that I didn't have. And I I looked at them and said, wow, how do I become like them? What do I have to do to become like them? Today, it seems to be the other way around. The public policy mantra is, oh, you've been successful, therefore you can afford to pay more. That you may have done this on the backs of others, or maybe you've gotten it, unfairly, and therefore we're going to use the power of our legislative constitutional rights to determine how much of your hard-earned money is their fair share. And I don't know how we turn this around. I think you would think, how do we invite and encourage and motivate our students coming out of our high schools and our universities, whether you're going to pursue a blue collar trade or a degree that helps you get into technology or business. Why wouldn't we encourage people to be successful and reward them for being successful? Instead, there is this mindset that says there are so many unmet needs out there that we've just got to find a way to pinch a little bit more money out of the private sector so that we can bring it into Augusta and solve all these problems. To which I would say, well, how are we doing? Is drug abuse almost gone? Is homelessness a thing of the past? Are our education scores rising? I think on almost any objective level, you would say, I don't think we can say we're winning. We may actually be falling behind.
I want to peel back just who this would affect, because I think there is real concerns about wealth inequality in the United States. It's about 2,600, I think, filers in 2024 that would be subject to this. And when this was parachuted in, I talked to some of our major employers, and they started to explain to me, there really aren't a lot of individuals who in wages make more than $1 million. So then, well, who are these 2,600? And I was talking to one of our board members at the Maine State Chamber, small business owner Brian Langley. We started understanding that he was going to be affected by this surtax as he just sold the restaurant he built up over 30 years. And it's a real mixture. But from your perspective, you deal with businesses, um, high net worth individuals. Who are these individuals that will be affected by this in the state of Maine?
But I can't break down the 2,600, Patrick, by who's just got super piles and piles of money that generates $1 million of income. Those are the ones that if they are so irritated, they will mobilize elsewhere. I think the people who are impacted the most are people who have what's called subchapter S corporations or limited liability corporations, where they receive a salary from the business, and at the end of the year, whatever the business earns for a profit, it drops down onto their personal income tax return. And I think that's where most of the people like Brian that you mentioned, that's probably where he falls into this millionaire's tax. But if you dig a little deeper, what you find is that they don't scoop all that money out of the business to take it home to live a more lavish lifestyle. You know what they're doing with it? They're paying off debts. They're looking for ways to expand and grow and reinvest in their business. And so on paper, it looks as though they're taking home $1 million and they're living much larger than their neighbors, when in fact that money is staying in the business to pay down debts and fuel growth.
Patrick, any final words? We're sort of approaching that time of the show. I'm sure we could go on for hours when it,
Yeah.
when it
Yeah,
comes
I
to this
guess
subject.
just lastly, we're at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. We're certainly trying to make whoever is elected as the
Mm.
next governor of the state that they have a sound economic plan. There's going to be
So
a
important.
lot of
Yeah.
focus on the U.S. Senate race, but the governor really controls a huge component of our public policy, really driving what the priority should be. And just lastly, what do you recommend for the next governor to be really focused on to try to ensure that we have a chapter of economic prosperity in our state?
This is so important, Patrick. We need the next governor, whoever he or she is, to be focused on proving to the private sector that we want to be your partner, that you are not the enemy to be punished, but rather we want you to succeed, because if you succeed, wages will rise, profits will rise, and tax revenues to the government will come uh, naturally. And we need a governor who's going to be courageous enough to recognize that there's great opportunity here in this state. Think about it. We have some of the deepest ports on the eastern seaboard. We have uncluttered airspace. We have four seasons. We have great telecommunications, relatively low crime. We have so much to offer the entrepreneurial mindset to come and make Maine a place to build a family, a business, and a future. We just need a governor who's going to say, I'm going to work with you and not against you. We're going to find a way to help you succeed so that all uh, government revenues can be benefited from it.
Well, Phil, we appreciate your time, and I'm going to only say one more thing. At the very beginning of the show, when I was talking with you about taking a look at government in general, and you talked about apathy, and you said we need more people that are willing to stand up and perhaps even run for office that
Yep.
can make a difference at the legislative level. And I think that is so critical, so critical. And so perhaps, I'm sure you would agree that one of the things we need to be saying is the governor, yes, but also people who are running for legislature. If you're a business
Yes.
person, if you're someone that wants to stand up and make a difference, then get involved.
Well, I don't know if it's who listens to this podcast, but if you're not a member of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, please join. If you don't know who your local House of Representative and state senator is, you gotta go meet them and let them know who you are and that you're paying attention to what's going on in the state house. And finally, I'll say, I wasn't paid or encouraged to encourage people to join the chamber. I just truly believe in their mission, and we need more people who put their name on the front of a payroll check to be part of what the Maine Chamber is trying to do every day while the legislature is in session.
Thank you so very much. And Patrick, thank you, my friend, as well.
Thank you for joining us. Great program. We got to look forward, although it's really deflating. We have to overcome these setbacks and really create a vision for the state to grow our economy, provide opportunity for the next generation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And once again, everybody, stay tuned for our next edition of The Bottom Line. It's coming up in just 2 weeks. I'm John Williams for Patrick Woodcock and Phil Harriman, reminding you that we're looking out for your best interests. So be safe, be healthy, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.